This is the Daily Climate Show. Lots to get through today, including Hurricane Ian leaves a path of destruction as millions are told to evacuate their homes in Florida. Scientists claim damage to the Nord Stream gas pipeline amounts to an environmental crime as a fourth leak is found in the Baltic Sea. And the host of COP27, Egypt, urges countries to put political differences aside ahead of the climate summit in November. Hello and welcome to the Daily Climate Show, where we track the changes happening to our world and interrogate some of the potential solutions to the climate crisis. Now, over 2 million people have been told to evacuate their homes as one of the most powerful storms ever recorded in US history batters Florida's southwest coast. Now, President Joe Biden has declared a major disaster in the state. Hurricane Ian has brought gusts of up to 190 miles an hour and torrential rain. And scientists believe climate change is having an impact, with the build-up of heat-trapping gases from burning fossil fuels, making storms slower and wetter. Well, the National Hurricane Centre says this is the likely path of the storm. Now, the storm surge has now passed through Florida, and Hurricane Ian has now been lowered to a Category 1 tropical storm after landing in the state yesterday. But residents are being warned that there are very strong winds and that will continue for a while. The National Hurricane Centre are now warning residents of widespread, life-threatening catastrophic flooding. Now, the tropical storm is now expected to move up through Georgia, South Carolina and North Carolina. Well, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis held a news conference and described the impact of the storm as historic.
The impacts of this storm are historic, and the damage that was done has been historic. And this is just off initial assessments. There's going to be a lot more assessing that goes on in the days ahead. But I think we've never seen a flood event like this. We've never seen storm surge of this magnitude, and it hit an area where there's a lot of people in a lot of those low-lying areas, and it's going to end up doing extensive damage to a lot of people's homes. So there's going to be a lot of work to do. Today is about identifying the people that need help, who may still be in harm's way, but also beginning the process of rebuilding some of the things that we need to have services restored, to have fuel, and to have the things that people need in terms of communications.
Well, let's hear now from NBC correspondent Chris Poloni. He has the latest from Tampa in Florida.
It's some of the most remarkable video I've seen in my career covering hurricanes for about 25 years. Just absolutely stunning to see how rapidly the storm surge rushed into these hardest hit areas, places like Fort Myers and Naples and up towards Sarasota a little bit. Just devastation from the water as the Gulf of Mexico rushed in. And when you couple that with 150-mile-an-hour winds, upwards of 250 kilometers per hour, just really, really devastating. The sun has come up now, and so it is literally shedding light on what's going on. We've seen lots of reports from sheriffs and city and county leaders in the hardest hit areas that said that they had a really difficult time doing much of anything overnight as the storm was still raging. And now the tough part is trying to just find these areas that are damaged, because there are so many trees, there are so many power lines and debris blocking roads that it's really slowing the effort down. Some places do have the ability to search by air, and so we will see some aircraft going out to try and look for damage and look for people who need help. But that is all just getting underway as we start to see the sunrise here this morning.
OK, moving on. And a fourth leak has been reported on the Nord Stream gas pipeline. Scientists claim the damage amounts to an environmental crime if the oil pipelines were deliberately damaged. Now, the damage has caused tons of methane to spill into the Baltic Sea, likely the biggest burst of potent greenhouse gases on record. Now, the Nord Stream pipelines carry natural gas from Russia all the way down to Germany. And this week, 2 leaks were reported on Nord Stream 1 pipeline and 1 leak on Nord Stream 2. Now, all near the Danish island of Bornholm, and maritime authorities have established a safety zone of 5 nautical miles around the island. Well, today, damage was reported by Swedish authorities, meaning now there are at least 4 leaks. Well, our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins is in at Bornholm. Siobhan, still an investigation ongoing, of course, but interesting there that scientists saying if this is proved deliberate, it's the equivalent of an environmental crime.
Yes, if it is proved to be a deliberate act, then this would be catastrophic for the environment. We know that a huge amount of methane is being released into the environment. Danish authorities saying potentially the equivalent of a third of Denmark's annual total of methane being released. And of course, it is an extremely potent greenhouse gas. It's one of those gases which, of course, is responsible to the climate catastrophes that many people are facing around the world, the changing climate that we're trying to battle. So the fact that this huge amount has potentially been pumped into the environment over just a few days is absolutely catastrophic. And as you say, some scientists saying this could be a war crime if this was deliberately done. And we are hearing now the chorus of voices coming out really now starting to point to sabotage. Most people in agreement in Europe that this looks like a deliberate act, that it wasn't some sort of accident, particularly as we now know that 4 of the pipelines have leaks on them. And we spoke to Finland's foreign minister this morning, and he reiterated that message.
Well, I think this is unprecedented. We haven't seen that kind of attack or sabotage on critical European energy infrastructure. And therefore, we do not take this very easy. It's something which we were working closely with our allies in EU and NATO. And I've spoken to the US and, of course, a lot of other allies in Europe on this issue, and we'll continue to do until we find out what happened and who did it and why did this take place in the Baltic Sea.
That, of course, was Denmark's foreign minister speaking to us earlier today. But really, the investigations going on off this coast will continue. Experts telling me that the gas needs to fully go before they can get down and really see the damage to those pipelines. But the reality is, even if they can find out what type of explosives, for example, caused the damage, if it was deliberately done, it's unlikely that they'll ever be able to fully confirm who was responsible.
OK, Siobhan, thank you very much for that. Let's take a look at some of the day's other climate news for you now, because AGL Energy will shut down Australia's biggest single carbon-polluting power plant a decade earlier than planned. The coal-fired Loy Yang A power station in Victoria will close in 2035 instead of 2045. And AGL, Australia's biggest electricity generator and polluter, is accelerating its exit from coal, according to a plan released to the stock exchange on Thursday. Today, the company said the early closure could avoid 200 million tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions. Now, the host of the next UN climate summit has issued a plea for countries to set aside tensions and animosity over the war in Ukraine for the sake of focusing on the climate crisis. So last year, leaders agreed to secure global net zero by mid-century and keep a maximum of 1.5 degrees of warming within reach. And Egypt will host COP27 in November, intended as a forum for companies to fulfil the promises they made at COP26 summit in Glasgow last year. And you may notice muted autumnal colours this year instead of the usual display of reds and yellows following this summer's drought, according to the National Trust. Now, the conservation charity said the false autumn seen in August, where many species shed their leaves prematurely to conserve water and energy, will put a dampener on the change of season. And it warned that without action, the usual pattern of autumn leaf drop could be fundamentally altered as the pace of climate change increases. Now, the Green Party's annual conference is due to get underway tomorrow, and it comes as the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says He wants the UK to become a clean energy superpower, and the Green Party says they would introduce a tax package which would result in polluting companies and the richest households contributing more to a fund and a nationwide insulation and renewable energy programme. Well, Sky's chief political correspondent, John Craig, joins me now. So it is, isn't it, John, the season of conferences. What can we expect from the Green Party, particularly after Labour's?
They're calling for a tax the rich policy, the very rich. Yes, Labour this week unveiled plans for what they call a new company, Great British Energy, to take over electricity generation. And that was Sir Keir Starmer's big announcement in his speech. The Greens are meeting in Harrogate starting tomorrow, and their co-leaders Carl Denyer and Adrian Ramsey are going to unveil this policy, which is certainly more left-wing than anything the Labour Party is talking about at the moment. They're calling for an emergency package to halt and reverse rise in inequality and tackle climate change, a wealth tax on the richest 1% and a watertight windfall tax backdated to January is what they're calling for. The Green Party is saying that Liz Truss has set out on a climate-wrecking growth at all costs agenda. They say we'll deepen inequality and poison our environment. And they are calling for an emergency tax package, and which will see both polluters and the richest pay their fair share. The wealth tax on the richest 1% of households, and they're talking about a dirty profits tax, forcing the biggest polluters to pay. The Green Party, of course, have just got one MP in Parliament, that's Caroline Lucas, but they are in a power-sharing agreement, an arrangement with the Scottish National Party in Scotland, and so they may have some influence there, but it's likely that this conference demand for a wealth tax on the richest 1% is likely to be pretty well rebuffed by the government. However, the Greens are in something of a competition with the Liberal Democrats for the support of people looking for vote for one of the smaller parties, and the Greens are clearly out to outflank the Liberal Democrats when it comes to taxing the rich and making polluters pay. A dirty profits tax they're talking about.
OK, John, thank you very much, as ever. Well, that's all from the Daily Climate Show today. Thank you very much for watching.